Hey everyone, welcome to the latest artist talk from Swords into Plowshares. We're here with three artists from the Artist Must Take sideshow. We're going to go through their work, hear a little bit about their process, ask some questions, and it should be a good fun morning for us. So first we're going to just do some intros. Can we get your name, pronouns, and then your medium?
Hello, my name is Andrea Montiel de Shunman. I use she and they pronouns, and my medium is mainly watercolors, but I do mixed media.
Awesome.
My name is Venetia Will, she, her, and I actually use whatever I can find, but my main course is acrylics and spray paint.
My name is Bootz, she, they. I am a poet, so I use words and spoken and written language.
Awesome. Then we're going to start actually with Bootz here. So can you just share a little bit about this piece, its name?
Yes, of course.
What led you to make this?
Okay, so I would like to start by saying, just talking a little bit about why I got into poetry, or poetry in general as a medium, which I believe is a conversation. The reason I say it's a conversation is because, especially with the political climate in which we live, conversations with people are sometimes very difficult. And getting people to engage with your point of view can be distressing, triggering, not just for you, but for them as well. So I feel that art in general, but poetry specifically, because that's what I do, is a way to encourage more of like a dialectic, and it gives people something to look at that they say, wow, that's really interesting and that's really beautiful, and then upon engaging with it, perhaps even change their mind instead of having like some cognitive dissonance regarding the subject matter, and any way that I can facilitate people opening their minds, I think, is what I'm aiming to do. So this piece in particular is because I did have the opportunity to visit the Dominican Republic about 3.5 years ago. And again, just kind of going into my background a little bit, I am a sex worker and I am a feminist. And so this was work for me. I had met a Canadian gentleman in the Dominican. We actually met at the airport to have this trip, which I was his companion. And I will say by the end of the trip that it really wasn't a positive experience with him, because he was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I'm a sober person. But throughout it, I feel that I did gain a meaningful experience in the Dominican because of what I witnessed, because of the experiences that I had. Even the bad experience that I had with him was still something that I was able to take with me and learn and help to influence my poetry, my feminism, and my work as an artist and poet. So on the third day, I believe it was, we were actually asked by this guy that we had the second day if we wanted to do something really cool on the third day. And we're like, oh wow, what is it? You know, he's like, well, I can take you to this sugarcane plantation. It's 40 kilometers of sugarcane. It's amazing. Like, you'll love it. It's so cool. And we're like, well, okay, you know, and I didn't really know anything about sugarcane or the global economy at the time. Perhaps that was a little ignorant on my part, but I said, okay, yeah, let's do it. It sounds great, you know. And I mean, halfway through, I want to say that I was just sick to my stomach. Because obviously the fields themselves just visually were beautiful, but once you just looked just a little bit deeper beyond that surface, you could see that people were enslaved. And it's the Haitians who are enslaved in this case, because the sugarcane is harvested by hand. And I believe they are actually paid maybe $1 a day, and they have to collect that at the end of every single day. And this guide was like, so excited to show us all of this and to show us the slave quarters, frankly. And I think at one point I said, okay, you can stop talking now, because his commentary was so privileged and from a perspective that was distasteful, to say the least. So this poem itself came from that experience. And I want people, when they read the poem, to have like this internal dialectic over the concept of being enslaved and being even enslaved to your own ideology or enslaved to global capitalism, which is pushing everything, right? And so also going back to my personal experience being there with this man from Canada. I mean, he's not even American, but he seemed to have, he talked about Trump all the time. He was extremely right-wing, and to a dangerous degree had these viewpoints. And in particular, the first stanza of this poem has to do with, he kept wanting to introduce me to his friend. He kept saying, I want you to meet my friend who lives here in the Dominican. I've been here like 6 years in a row, and I have this friend here. And so I did eventually meet the friend. And the friend was his drug dealer. And the friend was pretty cool, actually, you know, and I told the friend I was writing a poem, and we talked about that a little bit, and I was like, okay, I see that you are making money off this guy. You're not really his friend, but he thinks you're his friend, and it was kind of humorous to me at the time, too. So that's why I included the one you call friend, the one you call slave, because even though he kept calling this guy friend, you could tell that he looked down on him. It was condescending to him even when we had this little meeting. So again, the reason I wanted to include this poem in this show was just both to educate people about what's happening in the Dominican and to have them look inside and have that internal discourse and conversation with themselves because of the perpetuity of slavery in our world that doesn't seem to be coming to an end at all. And if you're interested in more of my poetry, I do have an Instagram, Bootz the Poet. Most of my poetry is feminist in nature, but this is my first piece actually in a gallery, so I hope to do a lot more, and I hope to be able to present a lot more publicly.
Awesome.
Yeah, are there any questions?
I mean, I can ask one just to start us off.
Sure.
I'm curious, kind of, you said this is your first piece in a gallery, just like,
Yes.
what started you on your kind of journey as a creator? Like, what kind of led you to pick up the pen or to start putting
Yeah.
words to paper? Like, people have a lot of experiences that they don't put into art.
Right. Okay, good question. And I had mentioned that a lot of my poetry is feminist, majority of it, which I do have a collection of hundreds of poems. A lot that I've put out there in social media, or maybe not necessarily published, but a lot that I haven't ever shown to anybody. My poetry, my writing began as a way to self-express some of the internal conflicts that I was having with sex work, with men, with my own family that I'm estranged from. Just to be able to kind of, as a journaling practice. And then I found that it was mentally stimulating to make actual poems out of this journaling practice and to hone it and to go back to them, edit them, and change things. And I love playing with words. I love language, I love words in general. So it's kind of a calming practice for me, but it's also a way for me to express my feminist ideals.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Other questions from folks?
When you're not writing, what do you like doing?
I love working out. So I work out every day. I love doing yoga. I love lifting weights, biking, doing things like that. And I love attending community events. Sometimes I have a little bit of social anxiety, but I do really enjoy being around people. I have an 18-year-old son, and I love spending time with him. He just graduated high school. And I actually wrote a book for him for graduation. And so I guess I like writing and I like working out and traveling.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from folks?
Yeah, so I have a question.
Come on in.
Hi, Frank.
Thank you.
I know this person.
Okay.
So you mentioned how you how this progressed from journals, right, to this exhibit.
Yes.
Did you study poetry in school, or English, or journalism, or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually have a degree in English from Wayne State University here in Detroit. It's kind of a long time ago. So I did study poetry and whatever, but I find that since my graduation and in the past like 20, 25 years, the climate of art has changed. The art scene has changed. Poetry as a medium has changed a lot, and there aren't really so many rules anymore. So I kind of want to consider myself a pioneer poet in a way too, because I don't really play by the rules in life or with my writing, and I take pride in that.
Good question. Do we have one more? Anybody got any questions about the work?
I don't know if it's necessarily, but you don't normally see poetry in art galleries, so like I really appreciate Swords and Plowshares, like recognizing like that this is an art form.
Yeah, I did. I asked, I was like, are you willing to accept a poem? And they said yes, and at the time I really didn't even know how I was going to display it, but this is actually sugarcane, so I made this frame as a visual representation to kind of add to the work itself, and I really appreciate it too. That's why I said I'm encouraged now to do a little bit more like this.
Yeah, it looks great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Well, claps for the artist. And I think we're just going to move just down here. If you want to maybe just do a quick re-intro as you step up here, just so folks are tuning in or hopping into the video midway.
Alright, my name is Andrea Shunman. I use she and they pronouns, and this is my piece. And I'll start with something funny. This piece has been titled differently a couple of times when I've submitted it to different galleries. And this time it's called Wormhole to a Rebirth. I'll tell you a little bit about my work in general. I love using magical realism, which I've been inspired by not just visually but also through literature. Growing up, my parents were always surrounded by an incredible group of friends, and so my earliest memories have to do with me not understanding anything of what's happening, but there's people coming in and out of my house with beers and food and having a blast, and people are dancing. And it was a group of poets, writers, and musicians and artists who will get together all the time. I was always inspired by art really early on, but then reality hit through all of the different systems that I've had faced, both in Mexico and in the US. This piece specifically, I've been reflecting a lot on Palestine. And in this case, it is a person emerging from the rubble in the very back. So maybe initially you think that it's just the view of, I don't know, maybe mountains, but it starts as rubble in the very back, and it eventually moves into fields of mountains that are quite fertile. For me, it's like a promise. It is almost like a prophecy, in my opinion. And the red trees that are coming out, what you see almost as fruit are actually watermelon seeds. That's something I've been thinking a lot about watermelon seeds a lot. I use the color red in the majority of my work. For me, it's very personal. And then the image or the iconography of a head coming out of the rubble is definitely one that I use as well. If you were to see more of my work, which by the way is not published yet, I'm just starting to publish it this year. It follows not just magical realism, also surrealism. You will see different elements that, for example, this woman that becomes a river. So those types of combinations come up in my artwork as well. I used to work in museums. I'll tell you, my background originally is I design experiences. I help design exhibitions, education around artwork. The label that we used to say is we help design experiences that help people find personal meaning in art in one another. But all of this I did, being busy, working extra hard, working all of the weekends throughout my life, basically distracted me from what I actually have been wanting to do. So sometimes I think that I just would love to be a person that does not belong to, in any capacity, to a capitalistic society, and I could just do my thing and not be thinking about these horrific systems. But I've been thinking about those systems too much and for such a long time that it's actually taken a lot of work to dismantle it at this point. So I've had pretty severe consequences of fighting the systems. I became a labor activist, community organizer as well, and all of these types of systems that I've been facing have definitely influenced the iconography that I center. Now, some of the things that I like to explore is finding joy as a way of fighting colonialism, actually. I do believe in centering, finding beauty, peace, and all kinds of joy around you as a way to fight. And it sounds really silly. It's not for me. For me, it's incredibly personal because that's not how I grew up. I overworked myself to death, almost literally. I'm fighting all kinds of physical consequences of fighting the system. So now my work is trying to celebrate and honor the process of no longer identifying myself with serving a society the way that society told me I'm supposed to be, or the people who were at the top, the people who are at the top of the companies I work for, institutions that I work for. Working in museums was definitely a very traumatizing experience as well. So I reflect on all of that through my work, and I'm also a singer. I also write poetry, so I'm trying to really pour all of my intentions of art now after dedicating too much to working extra hours. So that's a general introduction to my work. Any questions?
A question?
Yes.
How do you feel that maybe you yourself as a person, but also your art has changed since you left the quote-unquote system?
I think the biggest change is that I used to try to say the right things and do the right things to prove myself to whoever was in front of me. So I will try to justify that I'm a valuable human being. I will try to justify that I am enough. And it got to a point when I realized I don't have to prove myself to anybody. I am valuable because I exist.
Yes.
You are because you exist, you know? And I don't have to submit myself to any of this system. So for me, it's giving me the biggest freedom. I don't think it's a type of freedom that is attainable easily. It is a consequence of basically being a labor activist to the extent that I felt that unsafe, that I was going to die, facing my own potential death, and realizing that I don't want to live my life the same way that I used to. And I don't want to serve the same people, the same type of society that I used to. So I quit. I quit trying to serve these people. And for me, that's why I center these practices of community, joy. I believe in community as the solution for all our problems, period. And I believe that we only keep each other safe. I understand and I've processed also that I am not going to reach justice in every single system that I've faced. The man who molested me as a child was protected by the church, and he is free and living his life. The director, who was terrible and doing horrific things in the former institution that I was in, is still the director there. The woman who defrauded me is still out there. So I think I've had to also face injustice, process injustice, and accept that in my lifetime, there are wonderful things that can happen. And my joy does not depend on when I'm going to see the justice happen. I can be joyful today, and that's a way to free myself also from the colonial gaze, that I have answers today, that I don't need to serve these people. I am valuable today, I don't need to prove myself. For me, that's also fighting colonialism. Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
I mean, I think it's sort of a mixture of a comment and a question. I think your statement about kind of stepping back from these systems is, I think, a really interesting way to think about making art. I think in our society, there's often this, like, I can't draw in 7th grade, so I've given up on making art sort of tendency that folks have, where it's just like, that's the measurement, is you stop doing art when you were in middle school, which seems odd. And I think this idea of, like, creating something that, like, sort of, like, remembers and physicalizes the act of, like, the value of your time and existence, I think is a really powerful sort of approach to art making. So I just kind of like the way you frame that. And then my question, I think, is just, what led you to this medium or some of this imagery. You talked a lot about sort of intentionally bringing in surrealist or magical realist elements. Like, yeah, where you're drawing from that led you to paint, where you're drawing from that led you to those mediums or those themes.
My dad was a painter for a little bit, so my bookshelves at home were covered. And some of the people who I grew up with was Remedios Varo and Leonora Carrington, both Mexican and Spanish artists. Wonderful, incredible artists that should be way better known, by the way. And so I grew up with some of their pieces, and also the public system used to print some paintings on our school books, and it really did affect my appreciation for art, to every day have a piece of artwork. The parties from my parents definitely was a big influence of people who were there. In the writing, there is one book that has been incredible influence in my life, and that is The Mirror in the Mirror by Mijail Ende. Mijail Ende is the same author of The Never-Ending Story. It became a movie in the 80s, but the author himself, I will not even describe him as fantasy, which is how I tend to describe him. He's actually a surrealist writer. His artwork in writing is very, very surreal. And this is a collection of short stories that are so bonkers, I cannot even begin to describe them, and I have not seen that book almost anywhere. It was really difficult to find, good luck finding it. The Mirror in the Mirror by Mijail Ende. So, a bunch of artists. Movies as well, I love art cinema, and Luis Buñuel will be one filmmaker that will be an influence there as well.
Awesome. Other questions? Go.
You said this piece has had other titles and maybe connected to other things. I guess the first thing I thought of, and I'm biased, is I thought of the Rio Grande and the so-called U.S.-Mexico border and crossing the river. So I wonder if you would share some of the other titles and some of the other things that this piece relates to.
So one of the titles that I use actually I used it for a number of my pieces, is I Am Here, because my personal artist practice uses I Am Here everywhere. I journal a lot. Actually, this year not as much as I normally do, but I will just write in a day that I'm like feeling like the world is awful, which happens rather often. You will write. I will start writing I Am Here, big and small. I Am Here has been one of the titles. I think I don't even fully remember, but things evolve with me. I guess sometimes I feel that things need to change. I might add something later as well. It's like growing pieces.
Is there, you were saying you're just sort of getting stuff published. Is there a new direction you're looking to take your art, or the new projects you're excited about?
Yes, so I just came out queer last year. That's a whole other episode part of my story, and I am planning on doing a series of photography. I'm going back to photography. I used to be a photographer. I used to take photographs long time ago, like a decade ago. So going back to that medium, I want to do a series to celebrate queerness. So that's one. I'm writing poetry. I've been writing quite a bit, so I want to continue to define it. I want to find mentors. Bootz, I might reach out to you. I want to develop more mixed media. I love collaging, so I have a few collages. I've exhibited a couple of collages as well. So I want to keep on experimenting. I actually think this is the time to pour into all the ideas that have been bubbling inside, that all these systems kept really close, to just let them out. I've been thinking a lot, so I want to get better at this point.
Any final thoughts from folks? Awesome.
Well, you can follow me in Andrea on Instagram. Reach out to me, and I'm very excited to keep on working. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, claps for the artist. Then I think we can head out to the main room for our final artist. And you, the audience on the video, can follow us as we walk through the gallery. I will fill time by talking in the background. It's very normal.
Transition.
Look how beautiful it is. You should come see the show in person. And speaking of beautiful artwork, can you do a quick re-intro again just for folks, and then go for it.
Peace. My name is Venicia Will. Everybody's favorite weirdo. I'm known as a street artist and a vendor, and my art piece here is named Tradition Not for Sale. Generally, when I make my things, I actually really start them out as poems, and then I create the art around it. And when I first started this practice, I didn't actually know where I was going to land. I was doing things like just what I felt made me feel good, but not necessarily where it would actually connect with people. So with that being said, I was doing a lot of tribal work. I was doing a lot of African undertone type work, just really trying to find my groove. And once I started letting go of those certain traditions, more of my authentic self started to shine, which is more geared towards telling truth through my art. From my perspective, obviously, as a Black woman, in this time that we live. So I do a lot of things. I'm a hustler of all hustlers, and one of my jobs is I clean houses. And at this particular time, I was cleaning this lovely family home whom had a room dedicated to every place they had ever been. Mostly the places that they went to were centered around African descent. And they took pictures with tribes and they did things like that. They, in a lot of ways, actually did amplify them. But it was almost like it was just a room that was dedicated to it. When you went to the other rooms, you didn't find the publication, or you didn't find that they actually were, like this was something that they were really interested in. It was more like a showpiece type thing. And it brought me to a time when I actually went to travel and seeing it right in the real flesh, where you had people that in most cases would not even blink an eye at these people, wouldn't like really trust or want to have anything to do with these kind of people, yet they're taking pictures of them, they're getting their hair braided, they're using the land as a place that they can let loose in and travel and vacay at, but not really paying attention to the guy over there in the corner on the ground begging, literally not even steps away from where they have these places for people to, enjoy themselves. So it was basically in reflection of that. I listen to a lot of music and I'm heavily influenced by it as well. And one of the songs that I was influenced with this piece in particular was by Naye-Taye. The name of the song is called Hustle, but in the song she was saying that we just kind of go on in life and we don't realize what actually is taking place. And we don't realize that the little monies that we spend over there mean a lot. It's big, to where they can actually afford to buy big guns that don't cost much and wreak havoc in order to obtain the things that in these houses we have walls, filled with these pictures of these people that can't even put it together, not a wall. So I think that was basically what it was really coming from. So a lot of it on here, it says like war cries. It talks about like, do you know the cost of AKs in Africa? By any chance? It's just a reflection that cream cash rules everything around me. So it's basically just saying that they fund things like war crimes and all sorts of things that we turn an eye to, So yeah, that's basically it. That that's where I was going with this piece. And here lately, I've been being more expressive in my art. Generally, the pictures are still, but they tell big stories within. So, I don't know what else to say.
What the questions are for.
Yeah, any questions, guys?
Yeah.
So how long in total have you been painting, and did you have any formal training, or are you completely self-taught?
I am not college bound. I am not by any means. I am a street artist. Like, I did this as an escape. It was a way of being able to express freely and not be judged. And I find that with being this way now, there is no going back. You know what I mean? There's no going back. So, yeah, I'm not formally trained in any kind of way. Although I have family that actually were oil painters and things like that. I didn't even know that until they passed, and we were collecting things from the home. And it was like, wow, so maybe this is where it came from. It came from, you know, my descendants. And then maybe now I'm telling their stories through that, you know, picking up where they left off.
What was the question over there?
So you mentioned that sometimes your paintings start with writing.
No, they all start off as poems.
So they all start off with poems.
Yes.
What poem from that?
Yeah, so the poem on this was actually a song. It was MIA's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and she actually started out she started out and she'd scream out war, war, war. That's how when you first listen to it, she said that's the first thing off the rep. And it basically like talking about yourself, where I'd rather talk about mine. Like, do you know the cost of AKs up in Africa? $20 ain't shit to you, but that's how much they are. So they can go use this shit just to get by. That, to me, and people didn't want to hear that. Mind you, she was banned from places like this. Because the things that she talked about were, like, it was like, what? We don't want to hear that mess. We want to dance. You know? So, yeah. You had a question, too?
I was just gonna comment on the role of music. You mentioned poetry, but also sounds like music is also.
Yeah, it all ties into each other. So that is really what I'm guided by, honestly. Like, my father was a DJ for most of our lives as well. So we grew up with music in the house and all kinds of genres and things like that. And so that was my first influence. And then to be able to express through the music, with listening to the lyrics, because back then you didn't have like the things we had. We had like actually tape deck, and you had to stop it, you had to listen. You know what I'm saying? You had to do things like that. Maybe listen to the song a few times before you got it. We weren't able to look it up type stuff. So it was like the first time to actually hear and understand poetry in that way. One of my first influences that way artistically through music was Fiona Apple, because mind blowing, like 16 years old, composing first of all, and then being able to express the way that she felt in such a way that when you're young, you're like, wow, like so I think in that way, you know, and then it just evolved over time. So it became something that was like, okay, I can't express this any other way. How would I express this feeling? So then I started putting color to it. And that's where we're at right now.
I really like this piece, and I really appreciate that we see a lot of art now that like talks about consumer culture in terms of like recycling and products. But I think it's really powerful to see something that talks about consumption of tradition, consumption of other people's culture.
Yes,
especially here in Detroit, right? There's a lot of consumption in Detroit.
Indeed. And we can appreciate it, absolutely, but we have to understand that, pay homage. At the very least, understand where it came from before you get to talking about it, or you get to wearing it, or you get to know what it is, you know?
I think appreciation and consumption are different, like they're different things, aren't they? It's like you can appreciate something without consuming it, and you can very often consume things without appreciating it.
Absolutely. And we draw a fine line, because like I said, I am a street artist and I do vending, but this is how I pay my bills. You know what I mean? But do I push things on people? No, because I actually feel like being someone that is in a community, doing community things, like starting with the children. Someone mentioned it earlier, and it really put a spark in me because it was like, this is what I do. I start with the child. You know, we can reach the adults, but it starts with the babies. And artistically, especially, because it is truly what saved me. It was art that saved me. So, yeah. Thank you for that.
I'm curious about it lists here on the description that you use leather for is that for the whole canvas or
Leather
like?
paint.
Oh, leather paint. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was leather canvas.
No, leather, actually a recycled canvas. This canvas was beat. And when I say beat, it was beat. So you can't see a lot of the things that I fixed on it. But leather paint is my savior. I love it. It's the best medium for me right now because it's smooth and it's bright.
Kind of just high opacity, so kind of like one stroke really covers.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's right now. Spray paint and leather paint is where I really work at right now.
Awesome. Other questions from folks? Do you got anything upcoming that you're excited about? You mentioned a variety of mediums. You mentioned vending. You mentioned.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to be at the DAB next week.
Can you-
participating in that.
What's the acronym?
Well, you know, they're cutting down the bead gallery.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people got together and they're supposed to be doing a festival over there. And I'm going to be doing that. That's this coming Saturday, I want to say. What else? I have quite a few things going on. Yeah, but you can follow me at Naye-Taye _visuals. And just keep updated because I try not to jump the gun. I really live day by day. Although I do plan, I just try not to jump too ahead. But right now, this Saturday coming, that's where I'll be.
Do you have any artistic like pieces you're working on that you're excited about? Just like beyond like vending and
My
stuff.
first, actually, I did one yesterday, literally for a show I did for Pancake and Bootz at Tangent Gallery. So that was my most recent piece. I have been working on a couple of pieces. I'm playing around with oil, so pray for me. Yeah, so I'm working on some really large pieces right now. Really, like I said, going inside and really surfacing a lot of things in order to get it out. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, claps for the artist. And can we just have the three artists one more time just come down and do one final intro, just so folks can, just a button on the video. We'll do the order here. If you can just do your name and your medium.
Okay, Benicia Will. My medium is leather paint, acrylic, and spray paint. I do mixed media things as well.
Awesome.
Bootz, I am a poet. I did want to add that I have a nonprofit entitled Sacred Not Sorry, and we're going to be doing a book swap and clothing swap on August 24th. So check that out at Sacred Not Sorry.
Fantastic.
My name is Andrea Montiel, Shunman. I use she, they pronouns. My main medium is paper and watercolors, but I use whatever I can. I also write and I sing when I can.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming out, and thank you to our audience.
Thank